Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's the Sketch Monkey here. Today I'm gonna compare the Kia EV GT, the top of the range, to the Tesla Model 3 Performance. We're gonna talk about the design, of course, front, side, and rear, and also the interior. Then we're gonna talk a bit about the performance, and then of course we need to talk about the build quality, because the thing is, I'm not just gonna review this based on photos. I've actually had experience with both of these cars. I was lucky enough to have the Kia EV6 for a week, and I own a Tesla Model 3 Performance. So I have a good understanding of where the build quality is in these two cars, and it is going to ruffle some feathers, because that's what happens every time you say something negative about the Tesla, which is unfortunate, because the only way to improve the product is to criticize and find the faults, so the people of Tesla can actually address it and fix it. So bringing up these issues with quality in Teslas, which I'm gonna do in this video, is necessary for the product to become better. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech here before we jump into the design and look at the interior as well, and talk about the build quality. So the Kia EV6 GT is about, let's see what it's cost, what the price is for it. It says 63,620 MSRP, and you have a bunch of different colors. I love this matte gray. Well, I think that looks great. Also, black looks pretty cool. I'm not a huge fan of the red here. Kind of melts into the taillights too much. And they have a free color, which is this blue one, which doesn't look too bad. I also like these wheels and the interior stitching, which is in this neon green piping and stitching here in the middle, as you can see, specific for the GT line. And as I said, let's say $63,000 for the GT. We have the Model 3 Performance. And this is the one I bought about, I can't remember, I've had it now for 13,000 miles. I bought it for around $62,000, and as you know, I'm sure you've heard of it, they dropped the price significantly. So this Tesla Model 3 Performance today cost $53,999. So that really messes up the resale value for people who bought Teslas recently. So thank you for that. In my opinion, I think this is a really good deal at this price, even though I do have some concerns about the build quality. Still, the Tesla Model 3, I think it came out in 2018 or something like that, and they still haven't fixed the build quality issues. And I have a separate video on that, which I made on my third channel. I'm gonna link that video below if you want to go and check out the issues I've had with the Tesla Model 3 Performance so far, and that was about after 10,000 miles. So I'm gonna link that full review video down below if you want to go and check that out. And I'm also gonna link the review video, the POV drive, the 5 features I love about the EV6, and design review of the EV6. Those videos are also linked down below. So let's quickly go over the spec and tech of the Kia EV6 and the Tesla Model 3 Performance, and the EV6 GT, of course. Up to 576 horsepower in the EV6 GT, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, and up to 316 miles. The Model 3 Performance has up to 480 horsepower in the Performance, 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. So it is a lot quicker than the EV6 GT, even though it has less power. And you also have more range, up to 353 miles, and that is in the long range. Let's have a look. First, before we talk about the build quality, let's talk about the design and the design philosophy that is very different from these two brands. I do like both of them. I think they both look pretty unique and pretty cool. You have the EV6, which definitely has a brand new design philosophy from Kia. Very smooth surfacing. It does have a bit of a bean shape, which I'm going to show you when we'll look at this from a side view. The front end, I really like how they did with the LEDs, creating this distinct identity for the EV6. And you also have these nice lines in the hood, creating a bit of a sportier look with these bulges over the fenders, which I think looks nice. The front end looks a little stubby in my opinion. I would like to stretch it out just a couple of inches further. I think I made a redesign on that on the Sketch Monkey channel. You can go and check that out if you want to. I also love these wheels. I think these wheels on the GT, not the GT line, the GT with over 500 horsepower, these wheels look really cool, and I think they suit the overall design of this car. Now, looking at the Tesla, as I said, they came out in 2018 or 17, I can't remember when the Model 3 came out, but it still looks pretty modern today when we look at this design right here. And I think that was intentional, because Tesla knew that they're a new company. They're gonna start to produce or manufacture the Tesla Model 3, and they know that they're gonna have to have this in production for a very long time, because they have a bunch of other cars cars in the lineup to come out before a refresh of the Model 3, and I think that's why they kept the design of the Model 3 very conservative, but at the same time pretty classical lines in this design as a small sedan. I think it looks good. I think it looks sporty. And if I were to pick one of these just based on the design, the proportions, if we look at the proportions, I'm gonna go with the Tesla Model 3 because I think it has more of an internal combustion proportion, specifically in the front end. But when it comes to innovation and uniqueness and fun in design, definitely I'm gonna have to go with the Kia EV6 up here. Looking at it from a side view, this is where you can see this sort of bean shape that I talked about in the EV6. The EV6 I think would probably be better compared to the Tesla Model Y, but I'm not doing that here because I don't really have that much experience with the Model Y, and that's why I'm putting the Model 3 here in comparison. Looking at this, I love this roofline. The roofline of the EV6 looks very sharp, almost has this almost GTR-like styling up here with this visor, this being black, and then you have a sharp corner up here. And you also have this line at the bottom going all the way from the front in the lower part, and then boom, shoots up into the taillights, which I think is a beautiful touch, and the taillights themselves look really cool. And as I said, these wheels I think plant the car a lot better than the GT line wheels, which are a bit smaller and of course not as beefy as these wheels. Overall, I think it's a cool design by Kia, and it shows that you don't have to be super boring when it comes to EV design. However, as you can see, this curvature that I just sketched out right here feels a little too steep for me, and I want to push this out maybe to this point, something like that, to have more of a harmony in the proportions of the EV6. But that's what I think Tesla do very well. I think they do proportions really well. You can see that we have more clean lines and not a lot going on. We have this typical shoulder line that we have in a lot of sedans, and also a pretty typical shoulder line in the front end over the front axle. And we have this line at the bottom going into the bumper right here. So very conservative design, which I said is totally understandable. And I also like that they have the Uber turbine wheels, the 20-inch wheels. Unfortunately, these days, when you buy a Tesla Model 3 Performance, you don't get them with the performance springs or the lowering springs. I think a couple of years back, when you bought a Performance, it sat, I think, half an inch lower than the rest of the Model 3, the long range and the standard range plus. But now they all have the same ride height, which I think is a shame, because I would like to lower my Model 3 just a little, by an inch or something like that, to have it look a little different and more sporty. Looking at the rear end before we look at the interior and talk about the build quality. So let's have a look at the Kia here. I think this blue color, I think it's a really interesting choice to have this be the free color of the lineup, because it feels like a premium color when I look at it like this. And I kind of feel like this blue works well with these neon green brake calipers that we have behind these big wheels. And we have a completely new treatment of the rear end. Very unique. I've never seen anything like this before, so that's a plus for Kia for trying new things and trying to innovate the graphics of the design of the rear. And that's what you can do with EV cars. You can play around a lot more with the proportions and so on. Looking at the Tesla Model 3, there is really not to talk about here because there's nothing really that stands out, but it's still a pretty timeless design in the rear end. It does have some identity in the Tesla LED taillights here, so it's not just one bar or something like this that doesn't really give it any sort of identity. You have a little bit of that in the taillight design, and then we have this carbon fiber wing or spoiler that sits on top of here, specific for the performance model. And looking at it from this view, it's really hard to say that if this is an EV or an internal combustion engine car, because we can't see the short hood and how short the hood is compared to the greenhouse. When you look at it from a side view, you can kind of see that this is an EV because it would be very hard to fit an engine under here. But from this view, I think they made a great job keeping these internal combustion nice sporty proportions of a small sedan. Now looking at the interior here, so I've spent a lot of time in both of these interiors driving these two cars, and looking at the Kia, you can see that we have a lot of styling going on here, but it doesn't feel over stylized, which is exactly the same thing as I talked about in yesterday's video about the Sportage. Still same kind of feeling here. We have this big dash that sits on top of it. I think this this is probably also 12.3 inches display. You have the gauge cluster here and the infotainment system here. You also have this touchpad down here for some radio controls and climate controls, and I like that we have physical knobs for the most important settings of the car. We also have a bunch of settings in the steering wheel, as you can see here. And one detail I really love about this design is this integration of the start button. I like this little dip that we have right here, creating this soft, nice curvature on top of the start button. I think this is a beautiful piece, and I like when they add a little bit more attention and put a little bit more effort into just making things look nice. It doesn't have to be completely stripped down and no passion in the interior design. I think this is a pretty decent interior design, although I'm not a huge fan of big screens like this, as you know, but still, in this case, I think it looks pretty good, especially with these GT neon stitching that we have going on. Now, comparing the Kia interior to the Tesla interior, completely different philosophy when it comes to the interior design. Less is more when it comes to Tesla, but in my opinion, I think this is too less. It's just too nothing going on. For example, what I mean by that is, look at the pattern here, for example, on this armrest. We have some texture in it, at least. Here is just a flat leather piece that doesn't have any sort of, feel to it. It doesn't feel like it's been designed. It's more like it's just been modeled in a 3D program by an engineer and just put it in there. There's no styling in this interior that kind of makes it feel unique. But when you think about it, being this stripped down and this sterile, that in itself makes the Tesla interiors unique. But if I were to sit and drive one of these cars for a very long time until it run out of range, it would probably be the Kia, in my opinion, because I think it has a more cozy, homey feel to it, and I appreciate small details that you notice that designers have put in some effort into putting in place in the interior, and I think that is lacking in Tesla interiors in general today. So let's talk about the build quality and my experience with the Tesla Model 3 Performance after 13,000 miles now that we put on the car. There has been a couple of issues with rattling and pieces about to fall off, and there's also this emblem at the door seal that came off. So things like that, I just don't see the reason why a $62,000 car that's been in production for 3 or 4 years should still have those problems. And the biggest problem I have right now when it's cold out is that the entire cabin rattles in creaks from the, I don't know if it's inside of the doors, and I have that in the video, so you can go and check that out in the video I link in the description, where I talk about all these problems in detail. So that's the negative with the Tesla Model 3. I understand it's still a pretty young company, and these issues are important to bring up so that they can fix it. They need to hear back from users in real life situations how they are supposed to improve the products. But looking at the Kia, I felt the Kia overall was just a better built car. And that sort of has to do with probably them being in production for a much longer time than Tesla. But now when we look at the price point of these two cars, the Kia EV6 GT going for $63,000, and the Tesla just dropped their prices just way down 10 grand to $52,000. What I love about the Tesla is I am super surprised by the range. I was not expecting to have that type of range when I was in Florida, specifically when the weather was nice out and wasn't cold. I went from one side of Florida to the other, no problem, on one single charge, and even have some charge to spare after that. And I also like the overall comfort of the car. Teslas are super comfortable. The only thing that they need to work on is the build quality and the creaking and the fitment of panels and stuff like that. They still have a long way to go in that department, but I think eventually they're gonna get there. So which one of these would I buy if I were buying one of these today? Well, I bought the Tesla, but that was when it was $62,000, and if they were still on the same price level, the Tesla and the Kia today, I would most likely go for the Kia if they both cost $63,000. But today you can get a Model 3 Performance for $52,000, and I think that $10,000 difference is a pretty big deal, and the Tesla doesn't drop that much back in quality that I'm willing to give up that $10,000 and buy a Kia EV6. So today, if I was buying these two cars again, I would still probably go with the Tesla Model 3 and just hope that I got a decent example. But to be honest, if I had $52,000 sitting in my bank account right now that's dedicated to buying a car, I would just go and buy a used BMW M2.